announcements first. Hearing no announcements. Looking at the agenda now, does there need to be any kind of adjustment to the agenda as it's currently written?
Not from staff, Mr. Chair.
Thank you. All right. Do we have a motion to approve the agenda for September 11th, 2025 as written?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving the agenda, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Agenda is approved. Next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of the August 26, 2025 meeting. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Motion and a second. Discussion of the minutes? Hearing no discussion. All those in favor of approving the minutes of August 26, 2025, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The minutes pass. We will now, open the floor for any public comment. We will close the floor to public comment. Next item on the agenda is the CY26 health insurance recommendation. Tim, I'll turn it over to you.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So we have been working pretty hard this summer on looking at our insurance options for calendar 26, and we have a deck that we prepared that we'd like to share as we walk through the recommendation. Before doing that, I just wanted to introduce Shauna Rink from HealthSpring. Shauna is on the call, and we've been working very closely with her and her team as we have prepared some of the information that we're going to present to you today. So Shauna, thank you very much for joining us today. And I'll give you a second just to introduce yourself quickly to our board.
Yes, so Shauna Rink, I am from HealthSpring, and I am a group retiree solutions team or a senior advisor on the group retiree solutions team. And I've actually, today is my 27th anniversary with the company. So I just thank you for the opportunity to be here. And
Great, thank you, Shauna. So what we'd like to do today, Bill, you can flip to the next page, is just present a couple items here. First, we're going to, at a high level, just characterize the background that we find ourselves in. And then we wanted to address the two groups that we have in the VSTRS system. We've had the non-Medicare group and the VSTRS 65 members that have been covered by VHI. And we have our the bulk of our Medicare eligible population, which since 2022 has been covered by Vermont Blue Advantage. So we're going to hit on all of those points. And at the end, we're going to make recommendations for how to move forward on with our insurance for 2026. So if you want to move to the next one, Bill. So this is probably a lot to take in, but not really meant to pour over everything in specific. I think what we're trying to convey here is that health insurance is really presenting a challenge in Vermont right now. That little box on the right is particularly challenging when you look at where Vermont is in healthcare affordability compared to the rest of the United States. We're in a very challenging position. So to the next slide, Bill, as you're trying to think about why that is, I think the explanation, the Green Mountain Care Board recently provided a very simple explanation. There it is. It's a number of factors, whether it's, challenges that the hospitals are facing, the insurers, the providers, you name it, it's a challenge right now in Vermont. And I think in this past legislative session, we've really seen the legislature buckle down on this issue and start to address it. And I anticipate it's going to be something that they continue to address in the upcoming session and going forward. So with that background, insurance rates for all groups, individuals are increasing pretty substantially, and that's going to impact our members as well. So this slide kind of just gives the high level numbers so folks can understand how many Visitors members we provide healthcare coverage to. Almost 9,000 members. And the bulk of those members are our Medicare eligible group that have been served by Vermont Blue Advantage for the past few years, about 7,000, and about 1,800 between the non-Medicare group and the Medicare supplement medical only VSTRS 65 plan with VHI. So going back to recent history, I think most board members will remember this, but we do have some new folks. In 2022 was when we made our big transition from how we formerly covered our retirees all through VHI, through traditional Medicare supplement plans. In 2022, we moved the Medicare members, the bulk of the Medicare members, to Medicare Advantage plan. That was a big move, and it resulted in substantial savings, over 40% rate reductions for the product that they received. And it was an incredibly difficult lift at the time. I think at the time we were looking at what other states were doing, particularly in the New England area. Steve helped us take a broad survey of what peer systems were doing. And we saw advantages in that space. And I think it's worked out very well for us, both for members and for the state. We've seen substantial price reductions, and we had a good partner with VBA who provided a strong service. And the result was that we did not hear complaints from members. And our members are not shy if something's not working. So, we take that as a mark of success, and we've been very proud of the work we've done in that space over the past few years. So I'm going to start now with the VHI plans. And so again, these are our non-Medicare and the medical-only VSTRS 65 plan. As folks know here, the way these plans work is that VHI has to file for rate approval from DFR, and that's kind of our check on the prices. DFR does a review over the course of the summer. And during that time, where they had filed an initial proposal of 26%, a couple things happened. There are updated hospital budgets that came out after the Green Mountain Care Board made a couple of rulings that lowered the rate need. And then something we talked about with this board before, VHI was removing coverage of GLP-1 drugs that were used solely to treat weight loss across all of its plans. And so we went along with that recommendation from VHI. That in itself was about a 3% reduction in the rates. So the final rates that were approved, I want to say a couple weeks ago by DFR, are an average of a 19.2% increase. The Medicare side of that, the VSTRS 65 plan, is up 14.5%, and the other plans are up anywhere from 19 to 20%. So those that group has proceeded along the normal course that we followed in years past. So to the next slide. So what happened with the Medicare eligible rates? When we started coverage with VBA, we negotiated a series of rate caps through 2026, and you see them on the slide. The first 2 years were at a 3% increase, and the second 2 years were at a 10% increase. And VBA honored those caps through 2025. So you can go to the next slide, Bill. As we entered into this summer, we had every expectation to carry forward with this plan with our a 10% increase from VBA, and that was what we expected to be doing this summer. They're required to provide the the renewal at the start of July. So when they presented that on July 3rd, it was really a surprise to see a proposed rate increase of almost 50%. And that really, I think, hit hard. It's not only to see that they could not honor the 10% cap, but just to think about what a 50% increase in medical insurance would mean for our members. So working with Treasurer Pichek, we took two immediate steps. One, our consulting actuaries from Siegel, as part of their work, they often will review, they'll review rate filings and help understand how those, if there's anything in there, how they look, any issues that they can identify. And working with Steve, we initiated an informal bid process where Steve went out to any insurers that he could find that he knew, anyone that provides reasonable service of this type in the space, to find bids that would safeguard our members from this increase. This one, Bill. And so, throughout the summer, actuaries, kind of dug under the hood. VBA was forthright with them, gave them all the information to understand, is this rate increase really needed? Are there areas where there's undue conservatism? And then the bid process, I think, Steve, you reached out to 5 or 6 companies, maybe more, and received a couple of strong bids in early August. And after an initial review, HealthSpring's bid of a 16.2% increase was the most attractive bid. And given the timeline that we were working under, we really focused our efforts on understanding that bid, vetting it, and trying to determine if that was something that we could do in the time we had. During this process, we also did offer VBA an opportunity to provide a best and final. And you see in the slide, it was still in the roughly 50% area. So that's what we were looking at. At the same time, just to anticipate questions and make sure we were shaking all the trees, we also went to Blue Cross and said, well, what if we went back to traditional Medicare supplement? Maybe things have changed and that might be a more attractive rate at this point. Well, we found out that would require a 95% increase, and there are some logistical challenges that we would have had to overcome that made it very unlikely that we could have actually had that service in place for January 1. So, as of mid-August, this is what we were looking at. So the next one. All right. So then since that time, we've really been working hard with HealthSpring. And so first off, who is HealthSpring? They are so recently Cigna has divested its line of Medicare business, and that was acquired by Healthcare Services Corporation. Healthcare Services Corporation is a Blues affiliate, primarily out west, and this HealthSpring is a subsidiary of that entity that is focused on the Medicare book of business. And their proposal really brought a number of advantages to us. First off, obviously the dollars, right? That's you can't escape the substantial difference in the quoted prices between a 16% increase and almost 50%. So there's substantial savings in 2026, but also in 2027 and 2028 through some rate caps that we negotiated with HealthSpring that'll be in place for the next 2 years. HealthSpring has a higher star rating. They're a 4 stars as compared to 3.5. What HealthSpring did in its proposal was really match the benefits, but there were a couple of enhancements provided in there, and we'll touch on those in the next couple slides. But the important part is that the benefits, the plans are matched. The comp, JY, and what we are renaming as the Advantage 65 to prevent confusion with VHI's Vistor 65 all remain the same benefit packages. We went out and talked to folks who use HealthSpring, in particularly in the education space. We talked to Nashville Public Schools, and then we learned that Vermont State Colleges was a client. And so we spent some time talking with our friends at Vermont State Colleges and got really positive reviews from both entities. So we felt comfortable that we were, what we were seeing was corroborated by what we're hearing from other folks who work with HealthSpring. And I think the state colleges have, if I recall, about 650 members served by the HealthSpring plan. And then, frankly, the company is substantial. They serve almost 5 million members, covered lives, and so they have a lot of resources to bring to bear to provide excellent service, to provide strong communications. They included an implementation fund in their bid to help defray some of our costs of mailings and what have you, as we're going to move forward with this effort, if that's the board's desire, over the next few months. So lining all those up, we saw a lot of advantages in the HealthSpring proposal. And just to drill down on a few of those, so that folks can see, what we mean by that. A lot of these are not the core benefits, right? The core benefits are all going to match. They're going to stay the same. How much you pay when you go to the doctor or the hospital, that kind of stuff. But things like emergency worldwide coverage. We have retirees that like to travel, and rather than having a $50,000 lifetime maximum, it's $50,000 per year. That can be substantial. Then for some of the plans, there are even further benefits. So for example, mental health and psychiatric services are a little less expensive. Compression stockings don't require a deductible. Again, not core benefits, but each one of these things is going to be important for some of our members. So it's important to flag that we don't have any benefit detriments. We just have enhancements in this move. Next one, Bill. So, and then the networks. There's always going to be some change when you have a transition from one insurance provider to another. And so what we always look at is, how will that affect members? How will those details affect members? So as a Medicare Advantage provider, any provider that takes Medicare is someone who our members can go see, and over 98% of providers nationwide accept Medicare. We did have an initial concern as we looked at this bid that UVM MNC is not in the network that HealthSpring has. However, we've since been in touch with HealthSpring and UVMMC, and both have committed to work together to reach a network agreement. UVM has committed to treat VSTRS members as if they're in network. That's the same arrangement that the Vermont State Colleges has, and that we learned from our friends there has worked very well for their members. And in speaking with Shauna and the folks at UVM, we do see both sides as committed to reaching that network agreement as soon as possible. With this number of members, I think it's to everyone's advantage that we do that. So we're very grateful that the work we put in there is bearing fruit. The prescription drug network is very much a match. All the pharmacies in Vermont are a match. All but 48 independent pharmacies across the country match. So that means that the pharmacist where you go get your medications, you don't have to make any changes. Bill, next one. And then the formulary, which is the listing of drugs and how much they cost, is a 98.3% match. And just wanted to make a couple notes about formularies. This board may remember, even when we stay with the same insurer, formularies can change year over year. Some drugs will move up to a higher tier, down to a lower tier, fall off a formulary. So that can happen and has happened in the past few years during our time with Vermont Blue Advantage. Most folks, 98.3% of prescriptions won't see any change. All of their drugs match at the same tier. And if you look at changes, you see about twice as many changes are to the good, where the members positively impacted by their drug becoming a little less cheaper. there are a few that are negatively impacted and a few where the drug will fall off the formulary. In those cases, there are alternatives. And what we will be doing over the next few months is direct notification for these individuals to let them know. And in the interim, as part of any change, there is the ability for a member to get at least one refill during an interim period so that they're not without what they need for a time being. So those are some of the high points of the service provided by healthcare. And what we wanted to do in this slide is really kind of roll up the costs and put a point on what we're talking about with some of the different plans. One thing that's I think is really important to point out from the start, if you look back when, 21, 22, our rates, even with the increase going to HealthSpring, the rates that we'd be paying in 2026 are still well below where we were in 2021. I think that goes to the success of the program, that we're able to manage costs while still providing an excellent service to our retirees. What you see as you go across the chart is the different monthly rates that you'd have from the different proposals that we were evaluating. And on the far side, you see sort of where we will be at worst case scenario with our rate caps in the future. So still a very strong place to be. I wanted to just really focus on the, in 26, if we just look at the difference of staying the course and moving to HealthSpring, that's $11 million. And I think that's a really important number to just think about. That's split between the state and the members, but it would be a full $11 million more to stay with VBA than to move with HealthSpring. And if we go to the next page, Bill, we did a quick back of the envelope calculation. I looked at some bills over the past few years, and roughly 71% it's about consistent at 71%. When you factor in all the subsidies, on average, the state's paying about 71% of total premiums, and members are paying about 29%. And so with that $11 million broken out at those percentages is that, the savings next year, that's $3.2 million that members will have in their pockets, and $7.8 million that the state will save in providing the service. So really important amounts. And then what's that look like on a monthly basis? As you know, we have a number of different subsidies and a number of different plans. So there's a whole matrix of how much a plan would cost based on what your subsidy is and what plan you're in. So Bill and I looked at it, and Bill did really good work here with an average increase of 16.2. That means moving with HealthSpring, the max someone's going to pay for the most expensive plan with no subsidy would be $69 extra a month. Staying with VBA, that would be over $200 a month. And there's a range based on, again, what plan you're in and what your subsidy level is. So a real meaningful impact, I think, to members. And when you think about an average retirement allowance of around $2,000, right? This year, as we'll see later in the meeting, the inflation ran at about 3%, meaning that the COLA is 1.5%. So even with HealthSpring, these increases are outstripping our members' pension increases due to the COLA. So it's all the more reason why we were really concerned when we saw that high number. And then when we get back to the board's role sort of in the broader fiduciary space, we've got our pre-funding plan that we've been working through for the past few years. And so we talked to our actuaries and we asked them, okay, again, it's a somewhat of a back of the envelope calculation because the ADEC and the unfunded liability are going to change for a number of factors, trend, demographics, utilization, any number of factors will make a change. But we just asked him to run last year's ADEC and unfunded liability with reflecting the VHI and VBA increase or the VHI and HealthSpring increase. And the difference is stark. In the ADEC that we would have to ask the legislature for 27, it's about a $20 million difference on that piece alone, not counting updated trend or anything like that. And it would be about an increase of $215 million to the unfunded liability. So just provide that in to note the scale of the challenge that the 50% renewal presented to us. And, you know, when I think back to 2019, when we reduced the assumed rate of return and our unfunded liabilities went up substantially, what we saw after that was significant conversations about benefit levels, and it resulted in Act 114. And so, you know, as we view it, maintaining, keeping control of the ADEC is actually a positive for because it protects the benefits. It reduces the call for any kind of reform. And that's really an important piece that we're trying to accomplish. We think this is a strong benefit package. Folks have worked hard for it, and we want to be able to provide it now and in the future. So that's a lot that I've just presented. It's been a lot of work over the past couple of years with Steve, with the team here, with Shauna. And so we're really appreciative. This has been, I think, one of the most intensive periods since my time here in 2017, when we've been really firing on all cylinders to make sure that we're looking at something from all directions. But with that, I think what us and Steve would be recommending to the board would be that we continue with VHI to serve our non-Medicare members, and our Medicare members currently served by VHI's VSTRS 65 plan, and that we move from VBA to HealthSpring to cover our Medicare Advantage members. As I've said throughout, you know, 50% increase is just, we didn't view that as an acceptable increase. We really don't have any promises past 26 with our incumbent. We'd be out to bid anyway. And with HealthSpring, we do have rate caps in place. That recommendation very much acknowledges the challenge that we have ahead of us and the stress that you know, any change can provide to our members. Anytime you're talking about healthcare, it's an incredibly personal thing. It's stressful, and so we are aware of that, and we're working as hard as we can to try and be there to reduce that stress. We plan to you know, put resources up on our website as soon as this evening, so that we can have some, you know, something for members to see. Nicole has been spearheading getting information sessions in place, and we plan to hold 8 to 10. I think we've already got 7 of those scheduled, a combination of virtual and in person. The customer service line for HealthSpring, this has been moving quickly. And so, you know, assuming the board approves this, HealthSpring has to build this whole system within its system. And so they've committed to getting call lines and websites up and running by early October, with pre-enrollment kits out in mid-October, in time for open enrollment season that will start on October 15th. Importantly, this is going to be a passive enrollment. And what that means is, if you like your plan, the comprehensive plan, you're on it, you've been on it, it works for you, do nothing. And you'll transition directly from the VBA plan to the HealthSpring plan. However, every year we afford our members an opportunity to change between the plans, and that's what we would expect to do. That's what we're going to do again here. And so that's what that open enrollment is. It doesn't mean that everyone's got to go file a new application, just if you want to make a change. So that is, I've been thinking about it and kind of jokingly talking to the chair about that. That is my summer book report. What we've been doing in the retirement division over the past summer. Really proud of the team's work on this. It has been an all hands on deck effort, and we welcome any questions that board members may have.
Questions from board members?
Bill, do you want to take down
And
the, deck?
Perry?
Well, yeah, this is a very small one, and I think we've talked about it before, but just to do it in public session. Dartmouth Hitchcock is in network, or has agreed to be to treat us as within network?
It's in network, and I'm happy to have
Yeah,
Shauna
they are in-
confirm that as well.
Okay, great. Thank you.
Yes, they are looking for. Mhm.
Mike?
Thanks, John. I just wanted to maybe, it's not a question, but maybe just lay out sort of how I was thinking about this in terms of the staff recommendation. I think just the first point to underscore and reiterate is that Tim and his team and all of us been working on this for 10 weeks. Like, this is something that, for folks that are tuning in today, may be hearing for the first time, but it's something that the team has been deeply involved in for quite some time. And they've done a really deep and thorough analysis in a very short period of time. So I think, I want to preface that with saying, on July 3rd, even after hearing the 50% rate offer, my bias was toward not changing health providers. It's disruptive, as Tim said. That brings a degree of uncertainty, certainly, to change health providers. A lot of the folks that are retirees have been with Blue Cross or some version of Blue Cross probably for most of their career. So that was certainly the bias towards staying put. It also, not to mention all of those things, means a great deal of work for Tim and his team as well. But then thinking through sort of those individual items in a big picture way, the benefit quality, the network adequacy, the cost, and then also the financial stability. The benefit quality, I think particularly with those first two, benefit quality and network adequacy, if those aren't there for an alternative, then there's no point in even talking about an alternative. Those are sort of must-haves. And the benefit quality is, the same or in some cases enhanced in terms of the benefits. HealthSpring being a 4-star CMS rated company instead of a 3.5 rated company that we currently have means that there's some indicators of quality that are higher ranked than what our current retirees are getting. In the network adequacy, Tim mentioned this, but it's a very similar network. The one question that required some analysis and due diligence was around UVM and the commitment that they will treat as if in network like they do with the Vermont State Colleges, and that there's a commitment to work toward an in-network agreement. I take that as really strong. And then, having met those burdens, then thinking about the cost, and the cost savings are just dramatic, both for individual retirees and for the state of Vermont. I mean, it's a really significant difference. And, I did not think necessarily that we would see an alternative that had that much of a difference. But then maybe the last one is the most important, that for me overcame this bias towards staying, which is the financial stability piece. So, not only is HealthSpring providing a less expensive plan this year, there are rate caps for the next 2 years. So there is some stability now if we go with HealthSpring for the next 3 years. They're a strong company with a lot of lives that do work in a lot of states. We know that they will be in this market next year and the year after. There's great certainty to that. And with our current provider, we would have to go up, as Tim mentioned, anyway next year for a bid. We may get a more attractive offer then. We'd be transitioning anyway, potentially next year for that reason. We'd be transitioning next year potentially because VBA decides they don't want to offer this plan anymore, this market. They won't be in this market anymore, like they've left the individual market. They may decide they don't, VBA is not going to continue on at all anymore. So I don't see staying, which I thought of as the more stable thing to do in terms of the initial part of the analysis. I don't see that being the case anymore, staying being the more tried and true approach. I actually see making a change as being the thing that will provide more stability and financial stability to our retirees. So I just wanted to lay that out about my own thinking and how I do support the staff's recommendation for all of those reasons. But it's not to say that, you know, it's an easy decision. I think it is at this point. I think the staff has made it an easy decision because of their hard work and their due diligence and running down a lot of open questions. But probably like a lot of board members, the bias was certainly not toward making a change, but the case that is in front of us is really strong and in my opinion really clear that HealthSpring is the way to go for next year and really the next 3 years.
Other comments? Mike, you hit on every single point that I was thinking. I think you and I had the discussion early on in July, just saying the same thing, safer to be with Blue Cross and Blue Shield and an outstanding program that we had been involved with. But you ticked off all the reasons that I am feeling very confident at this point with HealthSpring. Other comments? Do we have a recommended motion? You're muted, Tim.
Sorry about that. I can offer a recommended motion for moving forward as recommended. The language would be to move that the board authorize the chair to execute contracts on behalf of VSTRS with VHI and HealthSpring for health insurance coverage in calendar year 2026, consistent with the presentation by staff and subject to review and approval by legal counsel and state agencies required to provide relevant contract authorizations.
So moved.
Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion on the motion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye.
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 Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Wow. A lot of work. Tim, Nicole, Mike, Bill, everybody on staff, thank you. I mean, and I know that the snowball's still rolling down the hill. So you guys still have the work cut out for you, and I appreciate everything you've done so far. I also want to go on the record and just say how great a program Vermont Blue Advantage is, and the fact that the Blues have done an outstanding job these last 4 years, providing incredible service, customer service with the retirement staff, and service to our members. And we would be going the fifth year with them if this is totally a financial decision. But I'm sorry that we have to move in this way, but for the move that we made in 22 to a Medicare Advantage plan, they did a yeoman's job and provided excellent service. So I just wanted to make that statement about their program. Okay. The next item on the agenda, RVK investment policy statement adoption.
Wonderful. Well, Steve, Shauna, thank you very much for being here, and we'll get right back at it tomorrow.
Yes, thank you. It's an honor.
Take care.
And I believe we have Sarah on the line. Is that right?
Yes, good afternoon.
There. Yes, I see her there. Excellent. So last meeting, we introduced the investment policy statement that we did some work on over this summer with our friends at RBK. And what we had discussed was to give board members a month to take a look at it. You know, if folks had any thoughts, concerns, edits, open invitation to reach out. Just by way of background, the way we formulated this policy was to start with VPIC's investment policy that, you know, in our view, kind of represents Vermont's view as to how we invest. And so using that as a starting point, we worked to tailor it from a defined benefit pooled investment document to one that was specific to our 403B and SDIA plans. And so between Sarah's team and our team internally, we went back and forth to kind of craft a policy that we felt reflected what the board has been doing in its oversight of 403B and SDIA plans. And that's what we presented last month. I have not received any feedback or comments or suggestions for edits. So at this point, we would recommend that the board open to discussion, of course, and to discuss it further. If none, we would recommend that the board adopt the investment policy statement and watch list policy for the 403B and SDIA plans. Happy to take any questions, of course, and Sarah's here to assist in that as needed.
Questions, comments? Yeah, I think both these documents are well overdue, and RVK did a great job putting this together. This is a live document, fluid. We can change as needed, but I think as policy, this is excellent for us to have in order to properly manage the 403B program. Is someone comfortable making the motion Tim suggested?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion on the motion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Next item on the agenda, KS member appeal.
And I believe we're running a little ahead of schedule, but I think I saw Miss Smith join the meeting.
Yes, she's
Yes.
here.
Hi,
She's
I'm
here.
here.
Hi, Miss Smith. How you doing?
Hi, I'm doing well. How are you?
Great. Mr. Chair, would you like me to introduce this one?
Please.
Great, thank you. So I did put together a cover memo describing what's going on with the scenario regarding Miss Smith's eligibility for VSTRS. And I guess before we start, it's my understanding, Ms. Smith, that you'd like to discuss this matter in open session, correct? I always like to make sure we offer where we're going to talk about someone's personal information, that we can do that in executive session if desired.
Open session, please.
Great. So the materials that we provided have a cover memo, and the basically, to summarize, Ms. Smith started teaching at St. Johnsbury in the mid 2000s, taught there for a couple of years, and then left active service. I believe it was 2007. You can correct me if I'm wrong, Ms. Smith, but thereabouts, withdrew membership. And so therefore was no longer a member. Funds went out of the system to Ms. Smith, and we no longer had a relationship between VSTRS and Ms. Smith. In the meantime, the legislature created a new law and required licensure for teachers to be in VSTRS. And where that's a little tricky over the years is with our independent academies, because all our public schools require licensure, but our independents don't always do that for all the positions. So to be in, you can be employed, but unless you're licensed, you can't be in VSTRS. And that's something we police with our independent schools on a practical basis. We realized in discussions recently that Ms. Smith had come back to service after that requirement came in place, and has been teaching, is an active teacher for 11 years, has been in Visters, but doesn't meet the licensure requirement that we have, and was not subject to the exemption that this board had for people who were teaching prior to 2009. So basically, if you were not licensed, but you were a teacher before 2009, this new requirement comes in place. You're effectively grandfathered and can continue unlicensed and remain in Visters. Ms. Smith did not meet those requirements. So per our practice, we remitted the funds to the school and terminated Ms. Smith's eligibility. We've been in back and forth with Ms. Smith, and I think she provides a compelling letter that's in your materials. And so at this point, the board has the discretion. There was communication around the time that Ms. Smith came back to service that is admittedly confusing. I think Vista staff thought they were being asked one thing, and I think St. Johnsbury staff thought they were being responded another thing. And when I review it, I'm confused. And I can see where St. Johnsbury staff would be confused as to whether or not Ms. Smith was eligible for membership in Visters. So what does that mean? Well, the statute gives this board, in cases of doubt, the discretion to determine whether or not someone is a member. They don't give that discretion to me as the retirement director for good reason. It's good for me to administer clear rules. It's good for you to exercise judgment in determining whether you should exercise discretion, because of the weight of the equities. So that's essentially what's before you today. And I hope I accurately summarized it, Ms. Smith, but I'm happy to turn the floor over to you as well to articulate anything I've missed.
Thank you so much, Tim, for the summary. And thank you all for the opportunity to be here and to speak. Can everybody hear me okay? Yeah? Okay, thank you. You've all hopefully thoroughly read my letter of appeal, so there's no need for me to recite the facts of the case and what I've already shared. To my letter, I would like to add a few comments. First, this sudden announcement and circumstance has been upsetting and stressful for me. It feels like a callous indictment on my life's work, and in addition is an example of one of the ways women are punished professionally for the choice to stay home to raise a family. During the years I was home raising my 3 sons, always with the plan to return to teaching at St. Johnsbury Academy, I remained active in education. As an example, I was on the small founding team that started the Ball to Nature preschool at the Fairbanks Museum in St. Johnsbury, which is growing and thriving to this day. While I don't generally like to walk around announcing my list of accomplishments, I've been made to feel here the need to show a glimpse of who I am as a deeply committed teacher. Since my return to teaching, I want to outline a few additional teaching-related accomplishments. 1, in 2023, I was selected for the position of class dean, a position I still very joyfully, it's a really fun part of my job, hold now while also maintaining my role as an ESL classroom teacher. 2, in 2023, I earned St. Johnsbury Academy's Teacher of the Year award at commencement. This award is decided by student leaders and school leaders. 3, in 2020, while continuing to teach full-time as I worked toward it, I completed my master's degree in education from George Washington University with a 4.0 GPA. Did not miss a point on a single assignment in 2 years of significant work. As previously stated in my letter, I could have easily chosen a master's program with a licensure track, but I did not based on documentation provided by the retirement system that clearly declared me qualified and fully enrolled. I recognize that membership eligibility is defined in statute, but this case presents a unique and compelling set of facts. 1, I was eligible and enrolled prior to my professional leave. 2, after this time, I received a formal eligibility confirmation from the Vermont State Teachers Retirement System. 3, I contributed faithfully for over a decade. I think it's closer to 12 years now. 4, I built my professional future on these understandings. My case presents rare and compelling exceptions. Though stressful, I've tried to approach this challenge in good faith, and I feel I've offered a pragmatic and fair compromise for the benefit of all parties. Given the board's authority to make determinations in all cases of doubt, I believe a discretionary resolution is just and preserves the integrity of the system. Thank you.
Thank you. Any questions from Mike? Do you have a question?
I just wanted to thank Ms. Smith for her service to younger Vermonters and congratulate her on her record of achievement and accomplishment as an educator, and feel fortunate that you're in Vermont educating our young people. So, reading the letter and reading the materials and understanding that there's really no financial impact on the system. And it was the understanding that she was doing everything that was required of her to do. I would support the appeal request.
Other questions, comments? I agree. I think that it was, as Tim said, reading through the different exchanges between St. Johnsbury Academy staff and the retirement staff, it was very confusing. And as Mike just said, there is no financial burden to the system. So I too would support the appeal. Other questions or comments? Is someone comfortable making the motion to accept the appeal? And Mary?
Yeah, I'm comfortable making the motion to accept the appeal.
And I'll second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Ms. Smith, welcome back to the retirement system.
Thank you so much. I feel like I can breathe again. Thank you.
Yes, and continue doing all the great work you're doing with the kids.
Thank you so much for those comments and for the decision. Thank you very much. Do you need me
Okay.
anymore?
No, I think we're all set. Thank you.
Okay, thank
We
you.
will
Goodbye.
reach out as needed, Ms. Smith,
Okay,
at an
thank you for
administrative level.
Thanks for the communication, Tim. Thank you all.
My pleasure.
Next item on the agenda, JT member appeal.
And we're ahead of schedule. Do we have Mr. Thomas?
I thought I saw Mr. Thomas on the meeting, but left.
He was present earlier. I reached out to him while we were discussing that last one and notified him, as well as just now that we were wrapping up.
Okay. Why don't we move forward then to disability, or two disability cases that are in front of us. The first one is disability for KC, Karen Cole. You have the information in your folder. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Okay, we have a motion to accept the recommendation of the Medical Review Board. Do we have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. The next disability request is for RH or Rebecca Hone. Do we have a motion?
So moved.
Second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second excuse me, we have a motion and a second to approve the medical review board's recommendation for the medical disability for Rebecca Holm with a 1-year review. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? The motion carries. Tim, you want to go through the fall scheduling?
Sure. So I was thinking that fall was getting a little confusing to me with some of the valuation meetings and doing an in-person meeting. So I thought I'd just put together a quick memo for board members for scheduling purposes so that you could see what we were thinking for the fall and give any feedback that you might have. One thing to note is that we had initially talked about October 23rd, that Thursday, as our day to have the valuations. And if you recall, we used to actually stack 3 of them on top of each other and just have an all-day valuation bonanza, I guess I'd call it. And this year, we're going to break that up and do the state and the teachers at the same time. And then we're going to push VEMR's to November because we don't have a statutory deadline there. So we are, because of Matt Strom's availability, we are asking to move that to Tuesday, the 28th. That still gives us time to put together our memo that Mike has to do to inform the legislature and administration about what the ADEC is for the upcoming year. And it means that we can have all our actuaries there to present. So a note on scheduling there. And then in November, we'd like to just get in the habit of doing 2 in-person meetings a year. Really enjoyed spending time with everybody at the last meeting. And so what we were thinking was, have the Empower and RVK reviews for the 403B plans and the SDIA. We would actually bring out the OPEB actuaries. So that's the Dan and Yori team. I think we'd probably bring one of them out, probably Yori, to come present in person the OPEB valuation, which as a result of your earlier action should be a much happier affair than it otherwise could have been. And then I'm talking to Justin about, we're kind of putting our heads together about whether there may be some trainings or anything else we'd like to add. So maybe a few more things to come, but that was the general gist of what we were looking to do in November, with December being reserved for kind of cleanup and to give a preview of what we're thinking for a legislative agenda and those kind of matters as we close out the year. So nothing that would require action, but this is more by way of a heads up what to expect. And with respect to board meeting topics, as always, we're welcome to feedback and input of any member.
Thanks, Tim. I see Mr. Thomas has joined us, so we will go to the member appeal for Mr. Thomas. Tim, do you want to do the introduction?
Excellent. Hi, Mr. Thomas. How you doing?
I'm doing well, thanks.
Great. Mr. Thomas, one thing that we always offer at the start of these, because we are talking about personal information, is if you would like to have this discussion held in executive session, we would do so at your discretion, since it's your information that would be being discussed, or it could be an open session.
Open session is fine.
Excellent. Mr. Thomas, I'm sure you received I know Bill sent out the materials last year. What we'd like to do is I'll give a quick introduction to the issue consistent with the memo I circulated. And then we'd open the floor for you to address the board with anything you'd like them to particularly know. They have received the communications that you sent our way. I want to start by saying this is, this in addition to being Mr. Thomas's nightmare is sort of our nightmare in the retirement division. We made a mistake and there's no way around it but to say we made a mistake. Mr. Thomas came in and asked for an estimate, as he should, to understand what his retirement allowance in retirement would look like. And whenever we provide these estimates, we have disclaimers because an estimate's just that. It's an estimate that based on what happens with your wages, with whenever you decide to leave, with any number of things, the estimate could change. So we never hold ourselves to the estimate because if we did, we couldn't really provide those in good faith. Well, when we provided Mr. Thomas his estimate, we did not apply the what we call the anti-spiking language in crafting that estimate. And what that did, because he had substantial increases in his salary in the last few years of his service, that resulted in a higher estimate than it should have been if it were made consistent with our practice. So Mr. Thomas looked at that, retired again, as he should be able to do, making those decisions based on information that we provided, and then saw when we calculated the final, again, as we always do, and there is a large discrepancy that Mr. Thomas clearly noticed when receiving his first retirement allowance. He reached out and want to really appreciate Nicole's efforts in managing this matter, immediately acknowledging the error and providing Mr. Thomas with the method of appeal. And that's where we are today. So, Mr. Thomas, I hope that was an accurate recounting of what happened, but please correct me where I may have erred, and feel free to add anything that you'd like to add.
No, I think you're pretty correct with that. So we did seek with our financial advisor, Edward Jones, with the estimate that we had. And so all of our financial stuff to retire was based on that. And so when we got our first check, like you said, it was kind of an alarming situation, and one that we couldn't quite figure out. And I was unaware of this increase. And I think the people at the state as well, Mr. Peterson, who was new, I guess, made that mistake and was unaware of that until we brought it forward. So just a tough time, because I would have stayed on one more year knowing that would have been corrected as a principal, but I couldn't do that because I had retired and my job was gone. And you kind of have to make that decision. My superintendent, we had been talking about it, so he wanted that earlier in the school year so they could find a replacement, which makes sense. So when I got that first check, I was pretty surprised. So.
Thank you. Questions for Mr. Thomas? I'd like to suggest that Perry, go ahead.
Well, yeah. I wonder if you could recount for us how it came to be that your salary increased by more than 10% in one of those last few years that you were working. And maybe that's a confidential thing that we should talk about in an executive session, but I guess I have a question. That's my question either for now or for later.
Sure. So I was a teacher and was applied for a principal's position at White River Valley High School, and I accepted that job and was a principal for 3 years at White River Valley. And so that was the increase in that.
I see, and it's because your retirement is based on the average of your last 5 years of service that this becomes a question.
Three consecutive years.
Well, it has been 3 consecutive, but well, then would that be a problem then if it was just the last 3 years and you were teaching for those last 3 years?
And see, that's where I was confused. I've talked to a lot of people because I thought it was the 3 highest years for salary towards your retirement, and apparently it's not. It's if you have an increase of over 10%. And Tim, you might be able to explain that better than I am.
Happy to explain. The way the statute is written, it's if there is an increase in any of the last 3 years. So you really have to look at of more than 10%. You really have to look starting 4 years back to see if in any of those last three, it increased by the amount in the statute. So when you're looking at that provision, yes, the AFC is determined by the last 3 years, but you have to get a base, and that base is the 4th year back. And so that's where Mr. Thomas is correct, that if he had hung on for one more year, it would have wiped out that it would have sort of re-baselined him at the higher amount, and he wouldn't be subject to him. And that's something we should have been able to flag, and we missed.
Other questions? Aaron? You're muted, Aaron.
Do we know if anybody else had the same problem, or if we've had any other appeals like this that we've denied in the past or granted? I don't remember any.
We're
Just
not
want to be
aware of any.
consistent.
No.
We're not aware of any. This is our team manages a number of these year, and I'm surprised we don't have more mistakes. They're really good about checking and rechecking. This one, fell through, much to our regret.
I would like to make the recommendation, Genevieve. Go ahead.
We can't hear you.
We can't hear you. Nope, still can't hear you.
I'm not sure what the question
There-
was.
Nope, you're still muted.
She could put her question in
Yes,
there.
Yeah, I think she's painting it in the text.
Looks like
asking whether or not the online and the portal estimator would catch something like that.
I believe it would, and we actually, just to, as we were looking at this, we looked to see if, maybe Mr. Thomas had gotten himself his own estimate that would have maybe told him something different, just as part of our investigation into this. And we did not see that it will leave a record if someone does that. We did not see any record of getting his own estimate through the member direct portal.
I just wanted to say our team in the treasurer's office, is always doing a great job and an exceptional job. And sometimes there are things that fall through the cracks, and just wanted to apologize to Mr. Thomas and say, I think the only thing that can be done here that's fair is to provide an exception and, let him move forward in his retirement.
Other comments? I agree. I think, go ahead, Aaron.
I was going to say, when we make that motion, we should just be clear whether or not it's retroactive to his first check. Right. Or just going forward.
No, it will. Our practice, the way we would correct it would be retro, which is just this past summer.
Right.
But we would correct it from the start and make it Mr. Thomas whole. That's sort of the way we do these.
Yeah, and to your question, Perry, the fact that it was a career change and it was 3 solid years, there was not a spike of payment of sick days or something of that, and that was something that has been historically issues for well, that's where the 10% cap came in, to try to prevent artificially inflating the last 3 years for the calculation. So the fact that, Mr. Thomas actually worked those 3 years, new position, I'm in agreement with Mike that there was a mistake made by the retirement office, and that we should move forward with the appeal. Tim?
I think not to sort of get beyond my skis, but I do think from our perspective that is a very fair resolution. I think that these are very unique and compelling circumstances. And so if this is the direction that the board is going, we do have a recommended motion language in recognition of Aaron's concern about, precedent and that kind of thing. We feel that there's very unique facts here and substantial reliance from Mr. Thomas. And so at the appropriate time, I'm happy to recommend motion language that Justin helped me work on.
Why don't you recommend the motion, please?
Great. It would be to move that the board adjust Mr. Thomas's retirement benefit amount to reflect the methodology used by the retirement division to calculate his October 2024 estimate based upon the unique facts and substantial reliance described in the materials for this item.
So moved.
We have a second?
Second.
We have a motion and a second. Further discussion? Hearing none. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Abstentions? Motion carries. Mr. Thomas, you are back to what your estimate had been calculated.
Thank you so much, and I appreciate all your time in this matter.
Mr. Thomas,
welcome.
we will reach out to you to work through the recalculation and the logistics associated with it. And both to you and this board, I do want to apologize again for this error.
Thank you so much. And I have not cashed the check that we had received. I just left that because it was an error, I thought. So again, thank you so much. Appreciate all you do.
Thank you.
Yeah. Bye.
Bye. All righty. Next item on the agenda is the 2026 COLA update and retired teacher earning cap. You received that memo in your packet.
And on these, both self-executing items, these we have not historically received approvals from our board. And so what we do prior to publishing them, I just like to put them on an agenda so that folks are aware of what we're looking at for the COLA and for the earnings cap for the upcoming year. Kind of a new thing this year is that we're going back to the old thing this year, which is the Act 173 exemption no longer applies. That return to work provision that was in effect for 3 years. So there is no exception to the earnings cap requirement for teachers. And then on the COLA, just to note that the inflation measure that we use, CPI New England year ending June was 3% this year. Our assumption is 2.3. So we will see a modest actuarial loss on the COLA category, but if you look at where it's actually been at, I think the low point was May at 2.8, and kind of came down from the threes. And seeing the news today, it looks like it's probably swinging higher. So that's where it ended up, and we'll be publishing that shortly. We'll make sure that when we do our retiring times later this year, we get that out as well in advance of the new year when it will go into effect.
Excellent. Any questions? All righty then. Next item on the agenda. Any other business before the board?
No more from staff today, Mr. Chair.
Really? What a surprise. I'll entertain a motion for adjournment.
So moved, and just wanted to thank the board for their time for all the important things we talked about today, and our staff again for their work in getting all of these items to us in a diligent way. But with that, move to adjourn.
We have a second? Dan, second. All those in favor of the motion, please say aye. Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Yeah, the motion carries. Yeah, again, you guys are doing a yeoman's job with this changeover to Health Spring, and thank you, and keep up the excellent work. Really appreciate it. And enjoy the
Thank you.
weekend.
Thank you. And send questions our way when you're talking to your networks. Reach out
Absolutely.
if they have questions. Thank you.
Okay, thanks. Have a good weekend, folks.
Bye, everyone.